Yes, I did just realize that I left my other light on. Now we're on the proper lighting setup. Doesn't matter, it won't matter, it wouldn't have mattered whatsoever if I didn't change it, but I noticed it, and I've changed it now, so this is probably what it was supposed to look like. Hello, and welcome back to Just Good Game News, your weekly place for all sorts of feel-good things across the gaming industry, and I'm not gonna lie, as the colder days and nights are settling in, it feels like the industry is shriveling up in regards to the good stuff that we usually get week to week, which is a funny thing when it comes to putting together an all-positive news show, because I still have some bangers, I still have some things for us to talk about, and the show itself is still split into various different sections, comprising tips and tricks, the breaking news itself, trivia for some video games, a video game spotlight in itself, and the overlooked section featuring new and old games as well. So there's a lot for us to get stuck into, but as I said last week, which was when all the Xbox stuff was kicking off, it feels like there are a lot of other focal points right now that are doing the rounds, and it's so easy to just get to keep focusing on the Xbox stuff. Chances are I'll have another video online about all of that, which I wasn't planning on doing, but they just keep making stuff to talk about. So it is rather ridiculous, but yes, welcome to the Just Good Game News. If you would like the full show, the news is part of the Just Good Game show, you can head over to patreon.com/Tailford for that. It always gets released earlier in the week, ad-free, and you can dive on the Discord and contribute whatever questions you would like me to get stuck into for the wider show itself. I'll probably put an advert in here somewhere later in the show, but thank you so much for spending your time with me every single week. It's an honor to be able to do this, and let's crack on with some news. First up, the breaking feel goods, the breaking news that makes you feel good. This is one of those that your mileage may vary on, to be honest, because it depends how much you're excited about new technology. I've seen a lot of split responses, let's call them online, to this, which is the idea that the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox are both coming in 2027. This comes from renowned tech leaker, someone who is increasingly more reliable as time goes on. Moore's Law is dead. Reportedly, having various insiders that they talk to and actually acquiring the documents, spelling out that the manufacturing of the PlayStation 6 will be starting in 2027. Moore's Law is dead said, I have a literal document showing when they manufacture, and it's in the middle or even early 2027. That's exactly when they'll manufacture the PlayStation 6. Also, AMD leaker Kepler L2 said that 2027 is not just on the table, it's the plan, unless any unexpected delays happen. That's according to VGC's write-up of the same subject matter. Moore's Law is dead said, I've heard from even more sources that Microsoft is talking to partners behind the scenes and just openly saying 2027 is when the next Xbox launches. Also saying that on paper it'll be more powerful than the PlayStation 6, which I think is a fascinating conversation to be had. I feel like this generation is still just finding its footing. Like, we have absolutely phenomenal games like Clair Obscur just dropping this year, and I always feel like every generation we wait for the developers to find their footing, and they get really good at mastering the technology. Something like The Last of Us 2 coming out at the very end of the PlayStation 4's generation, and then we move over to the new gen and it's like, okay, learn all of this stuff all over again, and it makes you wonder about the necessity of new systems. But then again, there are people who absolutely love this stuff. There are people who re-up their graphics cards on the PC side of things whenever a new one comes out, no matter what. Those people who buy new phones every single year. Some people just want the shiniest, best technology out there. The likes of the PlayStation 5 Pro or whatever is available, Josh Brown. And it makes sense, if you want to try and keep up with the industry and try and have the best version of a given game, then 2027 seems to be the year that we are switching over the generation. In my head, I feel like the pandemic skewed our perception of time quite considerably, and I feel like we're only in like the midpoint of the gen. But the idea that we're getting new systems in a couple more years, that's one for for the comment sections, for the Discord conversations, etc. Because I feel like I would rather extend the generation. Just tag on the years that we gave up for the pandemic, extend it out, and we'll just have a few more years of everybody being really good at something like the PlayStation 5, the Series X, and let the Switch 2 keep going as well. But that's when things are going to be changing. Next up, Assassin's Creed Shadows has been revealed exclusively from French website Deal Labs as arriving on Switch 2 December 5th. And they literally put the report together saying they can exclusively reveal the information, saying that it's actually going to be shown off in November. So whatever their insider is has some pretty damn good knowledge. Because we already knew, well, there were already rumors that Assassin's Creed Shadows would be making its way to Switch 2, but we didn't have the specific release date. And we also didn't have mention of whether it was a physical game or another Nintendo Switch 2 game key card or whatever. And the price tag, alongside the fact, that they're mentioning that it's going to be a physical release, the price tag is €50, which is about £45 for the UK or $60 in the US, which, is a little bit discounted compared to the initial launch price. I feel like Assassin's Creed Shadows, is a solid enough Assassin's Creed game, an incredibly well-playing stealth action game, but it didn't sell that well compared to what Ubisoft needed it to sell. I think the game plays incredibly well, and it makes sense to put this thing on Switch too. The amount of checkbox open world game design in this thing makes it a perfect fit for playing on the go. And also, when it comes to Ubisoft games on Switch too, Star Wars Outlaws blew people away a few weeks ago with an incredibly well put together port. Like, runs extremely well, is feature complete. Very much the case that Ubisoft maintained that sense of showing off what the system can do. It is good to see the support so far, and the reduced price point, I think, will get a lot more people in. It'll be a perfect fit on the Switch too. Next up, Sly Cooper. This comes from studio head over at Sucker Punch, Brian Fleming, talking about what the studio will do next. He mentions that because, they just did the Ghost of Yotei game, they just did an interview about Ghost of Yotei, talking about the fact that Sucker Punch kind of just does one game every 5 years, and the idea of making sure that they maintain their focus as a studio. They don't just want to hire up for the sake of hiring up, and they would rather pick and choose very specific projects every time. The truth is that whatever we do next, whether it's continuing Ghost or going back to Sly, the decision is really more limited by our cherishing of focus and time to iterate, which means that we can really only do one thing at a time. It has to be your best idea, and that's really clarifying. It's not like there aren't 15 good ideas, but you only get to do one. And by the way, you only get to do one every 5 years, so that choice is really important. I mean, that's like choosing your college and major every 5 years. The fact that he mentioned Sly Cooper, though, is the thing that sent fans into a bit of a spin online, because there hasn't been a new Sly Cooper game since the PS Vita version. They are available on the PlayStation Classics on the PlayStation 5, which is awesome. Sly Cooper, I would say, it has it's more like a cult classic over the years. I don't feel like it's held up, alongside the likes of the Jak and Daxters, the Crash Bandicoots, the Ratchet and Clanks. But then you mention Sly, and you get people like, your friend and mine, Ash Millman, who is a solo flyer herself these days, who are just humongous Sly Cooper fans. And I mean, she would rather have a Carmelita Fox game, which I think a lot of people would as well, to be honest. But still, the idea of Sly coming back in a post-Astrobot world, in a post-platformers are still awesome, by the way, world, I think this actually could work. It's also fascinating as a addendum to all this that the Ghost series might just be done by now. Like, Yotei is absolutely flying sales-wise. You can check out last week's Just Good Game News for me just absolutely gushing over Ghost of Yotei, and playing a shakuhachi at the end of that video as well. But, that thing is selling incredibly well. It would be very easy for a studio to go, hey, we'll just do another one of them in another 5 years' time. But I applaud the ability for them to focus on very specific projects. And whether or not Sly actually does make a comeback, we'll have to wait and see. But the fact that he's mentioning it, I think, is a worthy takeaway. Next up, the game spotlight. And I just finished Silent Hill F. I'll not do spoilers, but I think it's worth sort of zoning in on that title, because so many games released across the last couple of months that I feel like Silent Hill F got swallowed up alongside the Hades 2s, the Ghost of Yoteis, everything else. And what a fantastic game. I think it's worth mentioning that the combat is very clunky, is very awkward. All the stuff that you've probably seen online that's made you go, oh, I don't know about that, definitely comes into the fore towards the end of the game. There's a very specific combat gauntlet at the end of that game that I would say is the most off-putting part of it. However, there are so many outstanding qualities to this title, and the story that it tells, the world design itself, the overall art direction, and especially the way the enemies are designed, and the themes that it's getting at, where you play as this young schoolgirl called Hinako, in the 60s in Japan. That idea of her entire life being predestined, very much, archetypal themes of, womanhood in Japan, that idea that you're already spoken for, your value isn't really much of anything unless it's alongside a man, etc. Those would be potentially, well-worn paths if you did them in Western media, but I feel like doing it through the Japanese lens is massive, one, for Silent Hill, but also, you have Creative Ricochet 06 coming in and doing a really great take on those themes. And again, not to go into spoilers as to where the story goes, but I love how many punches this dude does not pull. It's just... The hell was that? My modem decided to take a dive there. If that came through on the microphone. I love how many punches this guy doesn't pull. And it's like there are certain sequences, without going into spoilers, there are certain sequences towards the end of this game that were so wholly original and were so gnarly and messed up and just really like, oh my God, I love that this exists. I love that the amount of money was put into this game to realize this particular scene. And yeah, to round it back out to the gameplay, you can run past a lot of the enemies. It is a survival horror game, so you're ostensibly encouraged to do that anyway. And it's made by Neobards. It's not made by Bloober, who are on a bit of a run themselves, going off Silent Hill 2 and then straight into Chronos, the New Dawn. Chronos is because I've been playing Hades 2. But, because this isn't made by Bloober, it doesn't have that weightier combat feel and the third-person shooting stuff that's in Silent Hill 2's remake and in Chrono. And instead, it is an entirely melee-focused game. I did find, to give them the benefit of the doubt that because you're playing as a schoolgirl, like who isn't known for, who isn't going to massively be used to hacking and slashing her way through various enemies, that kind of made sense, that the combat would be a bit awkward, that you would be hitting every other attack kind of thing. You wouldn't be some master darting around all these enemies doing finishers and things like that. But still, you can get used to it, and I think ultimately it is massively worth playing for the story itself and the atmosphere and just how different it is compared to a standard Silent Hill. Like, I really applaud Konami. I never thought you'd be saying that, considering the trajectory that they've had across the last decade and just how much of a disastrous year they had in 2015. But 10 years on, I do feel like whoever's now heading up Konami, the old blood seems to have gotten out the way in regards to the people that were chasing the gacha machines and all that kind of stuff across the late 2010s when they wanted to be a sportswear company alongside delving into gambling, all that kind of thing. Those people seem to have gotten out the way, and they seem to have remembered what the hell they do best. And now that we've had Metal Gear Solid Delta, which is a pretty exemplary remake of Metal Gear Solid 3, its heart is definitely in the right place in terms of the different bits and pieces that game touches up. We now have really great treatment of Silent Hill. Silent Hill 2 went down extremely well, and Silent Hill F is just such a distinguished entry in the series, and I just love that. I love how different it feels overall. It is very much worth your time, and it just is one of those stories that is depicted in such an unrestrained fashion that I think it will massively stick with you once you hit the credits. Next up, the overlooked games of the week. These can be new or old. I will always celebrate various titles, give them their flowers. It doesn't matter when they came out. Collectively, I think we can raise the bar and shine the spotlight on all sorts of different titles over time. And so we have a good handful here, a mix of things from the Discord, some people leaving comments on the YouTube as well, which, shout out your favorite games that never got their due, and I will fold them into the show going forward. However, I do want to throw my own in, mainly because I'm in a hell of a Tron mood at the minute. I just went to see Tron Ares, which I thought was pretty awesome. It's not a stellar movie. It does drop the ball in regards to the actual plot. The story side of things is almost the most forgettable part about it. But the visuals, the music, the presentation, the visual effects, oh, it's the good stuff. If you're a Tron Legacy fan or just a Tron fan in general, you should go out and see Ares. I think you'll enjoy it. Because Tron is such a fascinating IP, not to spend too much time on it in a game show. But I find that the rollout of this thing is such a weird franchise. And the more you look into Ares, the original version that was supposed to be a Tron Legacy sequel, that over time, across the last decade and a half, morphed into this weird Jared Leto vehicle where he came on as a producer and elevated the production budget and managed to steer into, leading the whole thing himself. Still, you've got Industrial Light and Magic doing the visual effects, and the movie looks fantastic. So I wanted to recommend, in regards to an overlooked game, Tron Evolution, the game that came out on Xbox 360. And I think PlayStation 3 as well, but it's on Xbox backwards compatibility. If you want to play it today, I still think that is one of the best Tron games you can buy. In terms of looking at a Tron movie and being like, man, I really want to ride a light cycle. I really want to throw an identity disc at someone. I really want to de-res a guy in real time. Tron Evolution gives you all that stuff. And it was the movie tie-in for Tron Legacy, or at least around about the same time. And it's one of the only big budget Tron games, at least this side of Tron 2.0, which was a big deal for its time back in the 90s. And so, yeah, I would recommend that game. Like I said, it's on Xbox backwards compatible. It's probably down to like £2 or something these days. And it kind of goes alongside of the newer Tron titles that Bithell Games have put out in terms of fleshing out the world itself. Bithell's stuff is a lot more script driven, a lot more dialogue driven, and choices and diving into the different philosophies of the programs and what it means to be inspired by humanity and trying to chase humanity and revering humanity as gods and all that kind of stuff. Whereas you have the more straightforward action games, the likes of Tron Evolution, that will just let you, like I said, ride a light cycle, do some top-down old school God of War style combat while dodging out the way of identity discs and different attacks and everything else, with great music and great combat. It's a really cool, you know, very much a 7 out of 10 kind of game. But I think if you're looking for some Tron, and there's a weird lack of great Tron games, you can do far worse than Tron Evolution. Next game from Nate and Oscar on the Discord is Hogs of War. What a pick. Shout out to Rick Mail for one of the most legendary voice performances in gaming history. Obviously, if you go back to it and play it today, there are oodles and oodles of voice lines in that game because the whole thing was a riff on Worms. It was ostensibly, if you take old school Worms gameplay, put it in 3D, and then try and voice every nationality in that game through the most stereotypical way possible, all through one voice actor doing those various accents and everything else, is very problematic. If you play it today. However, if you played it at the time and you have that soft spot for Hogs of War like I do, it was fantastic, man. Like, I mean, more so you do have really solid gameplay as well. We hadn't seen what 3D Worms gameplay could be back then. And Worms itself would try and chase that stuff on the PlayStation 2, which I would say is when Worms started really losing its appeal. I know the franchise is still going with a disastrous battle royale across the last few years. But still, Hogs of War was a great game to play at the time, and yeah, a total 3D realization of standard Worms gameplay with some, you know, some problematic comedic line deliveries, but quite a lot of them that still worked today as well. Just a really charming game for its time specifically. Marina shouts out Rez. What a game! We talk about different titles that have that synesthesia element, that idea of processing different, you know, trying to taste colors or trying to hear different flavors. That idea that all your synaptic processes are crossing over. People experience synesthesia in all these different ways. And I love that sensation. Different games that can try and give you different feelings that aren't as, you know, straightforward as just visual ephemera or whatever. And Rez is a really, really cool game that initially released on the PlayStation 2. It's received a whole bunch of different updates. Rez Infinite is the one you can get today, and I would recommend playing that on PlayStation 5 because as far as I know, it is completely upscaled. Like, you get it in 4K, HDR, all that kind of thing. But it is, I mean, in terms of gameplay, I guess I would call it an on-rails shooter. You're piloting a cursor around the screen, blasting different enemies as you're assailed by all these really cool visuals. But the main takeaway is the score. This real pulse-pounding, old-school, I don't know, like EDM mixed with dance revolution. I don't know my dance genres. Approach to music. It's just a really cool game. And because every time you eliminate an enemy or eliminate a chain of enemies, you trigger a different part of the score. You are putting the whole thing together as you go. I mentioned it would have been, I don't know, like 10 episodes ago at this point, Sayonara Wild Hearts, which is one of my favorite games of all time. That owes quite a lot to Rez in itself, and quite a lot of other rhythm games do as well. But I feel like Rez never fully gets its flowers as being so massively influential and seminal in regards to controllable synesthesia elements in video games. So shout out to Rez. Like I said, it's available everywhere on the PlayStation side anyway, and you should absolutely go check it out. Lastly, Rockman3K3 over on the Discord recommends Killer 7, which as far as I'm concerned was the game that put Suda51 on the map. I know that he was developing various different titles before then, but, you know, if you like Suda51's approach to games, maybe you've played No More Heroes. I feel like that's maybe the most well-received and widest title that he put together. He does have Romeo is a Dead Man coming out next year. Goichi Suda is his real name. And Killer 7 was a game that released on PlayStation 2. The idea of this hitman that has these 7 different killer personalities in their mind, and they can just morph into them over time. I didn't play hardly any of this game, but I remember being blown away by the visuals. And the gaming press at the time absolutely lost their minds over it. I think just because we were in the middle of the cell shading boom of the mid-2000s, which, you know, I mentioned Sly Cooper before. That was another game that was renowned just for its visual style alone. Killer 7, you know, massively running with the idea of cell-shaded art directions. But gameplay-wise, you know, you're doing a lot of shooting. It's a lot of gallery stuff. It's a lot of making different decisions. But the main reason that you should play Killer 7, or the main reason I would say looking back on it, that it's renowned, is that killer lol Suda51 humor. Like, just really great cutscene direction, really fun, over-the-top surrealist elements mixed with clearly a love of Western action and Hollywood cinema. There's just a lot of really cool elements to this, and it's a shame that it's not really available on modern systems. You know, it hasn't really been remastered and made available. So we can keep our fingers crossed that at some point a PlayStation Plus release would put Killer 7 back on the map, because Suda51 is still going strong, as well he should be. Voices like his, creative minds like his, belong in video games. Next up, 3 game deals and 3 game deals, if you know what I'm saying. And I want to recommend various different titles that you might not see when you go on the likes of the PlayStation Store, the Xbox homepage, or whatever, because I noticed straight away that Red Dead Redemption 2 is down to like $14.99, which you should massively go check that out. However, I feel like that'll be the thing that PlayStation will be throwing in front of people, and I like to peruse peruse the deals themselves and just see which hidden gems or things that I can find that chances are you might not have played or you might have heard about, and then, you know, hopefully find something that has enough money off where it's like, okay, that's worth giving a shot. Which is to mention, Nobody Wants to Die, my beloved Nobody Wants to Die, is down to £5.99 until the 22nd of October. A really cool futurescape detective thriller, Blade Runner style. If you like your gritty cyberpunk detective thriller games, media, whatever, it's one of them, where you have a smoking protagonist overlooking a ridiculously over-the-top neo-metropolis trying to figure out, you know, the trail of bodies and what happened and the augments and the different mind control devices and everything else. I absolutely love this game, more so for the art direction and like the character writing, the dialogue, everything else. It's a really, really, really cool game. I think that on the development side, the devs themselves never did any follow-ups. It seems like at some point they did, I don't know if they ran out of money, but the very end of the game has a little bit of a rush to it that the rest of it doesn't. But still, I would recommend it as a world to get lost in. For £6, it's an absolute steal. And it has a really cool backdrop, the idea of this future world where age has been eliminated. So you have all this older generation that just keeps swapping their minds into younger and younger bodies. But that halts the progress. That halts the ability for trends to appear, for different visual styles to appear, because everyone is only into a certain thing. And that idea is explored through the world design itself, as you are this detective who has lived through many other lives at this point. And that idea of a exhausted consciousness, you know, on one last job kind of thing, as they struggle to, you know, even find the world interesting anymore. I think there's a lot of great themes here that are expertly put together. Next, Inside is down to £1.69 until the 10th of November over on the Nintendo Switch eShop. For £1.69, I mean, that's like a meal deal. That's like a sandwich. And if you haven't played Inside, it is one of my absolute favorite games. It comes from Don't Nod, the guys that did Limbo back in like 2010. They then took about 6 years putting all the money that they made from Limbo into Inside, which became one of the most talked about titles of 2016 back in the day. You know, eclipsed in regards to Game of the Year stuff by the likes of Overwatch or whatever. But Inside is just such an immaculate title. You can tell that they spent every, you know, waking second of development refining every last puzzle that was in the game, every last piece of the physics model that goes into the game. And obviously, you know, you probably know about Inside's ending, which I won't spoil here if you don't, but that is the thing that blew up in terms of like, what the living hell is this game? This is going in such a crazy direction. However, the thing that I love about it is just how interpretational it is. And you'll get your own read on it as you start moving through the game. Like, it is a side-scrolling puzzle platformer, I guess we'd call it, but it's so, I would say, easy to get through, like so Moorish and so enjoyable and so dark and twisted in regards to this young boy who you just start the game running through a field, you go into a factory, you start finding out what the hell this factory seems to be up to, and it's what happens towards the end that, like I say, is the big takeaway from the game. However, I just love drinking this thing, and it's really short as well. And I guess it's a good reason that it's down to £1.69 in the UK, because you'll probably get through it in an afternoon. But that's what makes it perfect. You know, if you're like me and you don't have a whole lot of free time, you know, you've got a kid to take care of and all sorts of stuff, you just want great games in short amounts of time. And something like Inside is perfect. You can finish this in an afternoon, 3 to 4 hours or whatever, and hopefully it'll be worth your time. I can't recommend it enough. I absolutely love this thing. Lastly, back onto PlayStation, and Ghost Runner is down to £3.99 still until the 22nd of October. It seems like the PlayStation have just launched a new set of deals, a deal window, so a few other things are all going to expire on the 22nd. Ghost Runner, though, if you like your hard... Ghost Runner, though, if you like your hard games where it's like, just push the button, put me back in, let me have another go, you know, just give me the instant checkpoint, I can do this, Ghost Runner is that mentality exemplified. It's a first-person game, it's a hack and slash, but every enemy essentially dies in one hit, but pretty much so do you, and it's extremely hard because of that. However, if you play it on a PlayStation, no, it is available on Switch, but if you play it on better hardware, it just takes full advantage of a beefier system to run extremely fast and super slick. You'll become one with the controls as you're darting through the air, taking dudes out, cutting their limbs off, all while this really great synthwave soundtrack from one of my favorite synthwave artists, Daniel Deluxe, pumps away in the background. It's just a really, really cool game. And again, you know, Nobody Wants to Die tackles that cyberpunk future in a way more quasi-realistic approach. Ghost Runner is your more standard, over-the-top cyberpunk 2077 art style, with cyber ninjas, glowing blades, over-the-top masks, like lots of Japanese-infused elements in terms of the visuals, but with this really killer approach to gameplay that, you know, it'll either click with you or you'll go, oh my god, I can't keep up with this. And I'll put plenty of footage on screen for you to check out while I'm talking about this, but I found Ghost Runner to be incredibly addictive. I never finished it because it was just a little bit too hard for me by the end, but I know a lot of, you know, it blew up so much, they managed to do a sequel for it and everything. And so I would still recommend it, because it might be the kind of scratch the itch, old school arcadey, you know, just try again gameplay that could massively speak to you. Next up, some tips and tricks, and I mentioned Silent Hill F earlier on. I just thought I'd share a few things that I learned about that game since finishing it, mainly because, as I mentioned before in the game spotlight, Silent Hill's combat is the thing that I think makes people bounce off the game. And there are ways to mitigate the, I guess, clunkiness of the combat, because the game does tell you that you have focus attacks, which is a move where you lock onto an enemy, charge up your sanity bar, and then do one devastating move in all of sports entertainment. And it's quite easy to then forget that those are you know, part of your repertoire when you're being assailed by like 3 or 4 enemies at once. However, it's worth noting that the focus attacks do just as much damage as the counter attacks the game tells you about earlier on. And I feel like the game reminds you about the fact that you can do these counters more often because they are triggerable when an enemy flashes red. However, to me, you're better just staying out the way of the enemies, doing a focused attack, holding it for as long as you can, and then pressing the right trigger and diving in, or R1 I think it is, pressing the light attack button and diving in, because Hinako has a really crazy like distance closing move where once you do a focus attack, she'll charge right in and then deliver the move. So to me, that worked a hell of a lot better than waiting for the counter window, the parry window. Also, the slow motion last minute dodges that you do, if you dodge at the very last minute when an enemy is attacking you, that restores your stamina. The game is incredibly tough when it comes to stamina management, especially towards the end of the game. Like I said, you're fighting bosses, you're fighting multiple enemies at once, you're doing these heavy attacks, and you're trying to dodge. And you'll just be left standing there, Dark Souls style, just your character panting as you're waiting for the stamina to return. If you wait and analyze your enemy's animations a little bit more, dodge at the last minute and get your stamina back, and that is a massive help to the combat. Like, there's one big final combat gauntlet in the game that was the point where I was like, good lord, you guys are throwing so many enemies at me. I don't feel like this combat model was made for this. But if you utilize the stamina regeneration stuff, it makes it a little bit more palatable, a little bit more easier in terms of how much they're asking you to do. The last thing I would say is to not spend a whole lot of money on the EMA upgrades. These are the ones where you find specific wooden plaques called EMAs or AMAs. I have no idea how to pronounce it. But these are the ones that extend your health, your stamina. To me, they are almost useless because they only give you like a millimeter's worth of additional health or stamina, and you're better off saving your faith, the faith currency, and putting it into the Omamori upgrades. Those are the ones that let you equip multiple trinkets at once. You know, the things that will make you hit harder, use less stamina overall. You know, you can recover different stamina when you kill an enemy, things like that. Once you start equipping more than one of them, which I didn't start doing till the very end of the game, I'm a fool to myself. I kept thinking that we were going to get more of those EMA upgrades towards the end, and it just didn't happen. That stuff is built for the multiple playthroughs instead. You're better off focusing on the Omamori stuff. Like I mentioned earlier on, you need to finish the game multiple times for the full story. I think you get enough on the first playthrough, especially when it comes to the really fun part of the game, which is the fan theories and what's really going on. But if you're planning on going through the game multiple times, invest in the Omamoris and just make one hell of a build for Hinako, and then you can just demolish all of the different enemies as you get through them instead. Lastly, some trivia. I always like to send you off into the weekend with a lovely bit of gaming trivia, and this one comes just last minute. I was starting to put together some trivia regarding Metal Gear because we're playing that for the Man Who Stares at Goats, which is coming up later in the month, where I revisit one particular best game of all time and then do a podcast on it, which if you've not subscribed over on the patreon.com/Tailford, please go join the Just Good Game podcast tier and you can get access to that Patreon exclusive podcast. However, I was looking on Twitter and Ed Boon just did a tribute to one of the foundational members of Mortal Kombat. Dan Forden is the Toasty guy, the guy who pops in from the side of the screen and goes, Toasty! in the middle of random Mortal Kombat gameplay. He's just left NetherRealm after like a ridiculous amount of time. Like Mortal Kombat came out in like 1992, and Ed Boon did a really great tribute to him, just outlining just how much of an impact this guy had. And it's just kind of awesome. So to read, he also says that he was one of the 4 people who made the first Mortal Kombat, and Mortal Kombat's one of my favorite franchises. So any excuse I get to talk about this, I will take. But it is fascinating whenever you look into the making of Mortal Kombat. You see the original creators sculpting the clay models for the likes of Goro or whoever to then scan into the game. The original motion capture sessions, all that kind of stuff. The Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection is out later this month, so I can't wait to see more of that footage, because we're getting that from a Digital Eclipse, so we'll get a full making of how those original games were put together. But I just thought, with Ed Boon mentioning this and celebrating the guy after, a veteran career and being instrumental into why something like a Mortal Kombat is so well remembered, I thought I'd read his quote. He says, "Remember the first time you saw and heard an uppercut, that explosive impact, the announcer's wicked laugh, the dun 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 before a fatality." He says all of that was Dan. Remember the amazing music that defined the atmosphere of the fighting arenas, that was all Dan. And so I think a lot of us, if you're a Mortal Kombat fan at all, you owe a lot of your love of the IP to Dan Forden, and it's fascinating on a side tangent, the fact that Ed Boon has been around since the beginning, that a lot of these veteran individuals, like what's happening on the Nintendo side, Shigeru Miyamoto is approaching his retirement after having helmed Nintendo for 40 plus years, and it's crazy to think about that stuff, that a lot of the gaming industry that we grew up loving and the individuals that we grew up loving, shaping the industry itself, their runs are coming to an end. They're going into retirement. And what's that going to mean for the future of these franchises, these companies, etc.? And so I just thought, why not take a minute to shout out Dan Forden, shout out Mortal Kombat, and to just highlight the amount of different things that Forden brought to the industry itself, or to the franchise itself. Because I love me some Mortal Kombat, and chances are you do too. And that has been episode 11 of the Just Good Game News. I am loving that we are continuing doing this. Massive shout out to everybody who took part over on the Discord, submitting your different overlooked games, and the community in general. I think we have a really lovely space over there. I always wanted to make a place, and I mentioned this in the very first episode and the video where I announced I was leaving What Culture to do this stuff, that I just want to make a place for adults and mature people to enjoy stuff. And thankfully that's exactly what's coming together. So massive shout out to every single person on the Discord, and if you would like to get involved, just search Scott Tilford. You'll be able to find the Scott Tilford server, and then you can take part in the weekly questions, the bigger part of the Just Good Game News, which is part of the Just Good Game show, every single week. So again, massive thank you to all of you, and thank you so much for watching this. Hopefully every single week I like to put together a positive show and as many positive stories as I can. So hopefully I'll see you over on the Discord. I might see you over on the Patreon, and if not, I will see you next week. Stick around if you're a helping hero in the top tier of the Patreon though, because I like to do a different one of these every week, and I thought, why not do a Silent Hill themed send-off? Last week we had Ghost of Yote. I dug out the shakuhachi and played a few notes. It was good fun. Done some fireworks stuff, some chill stuff in previous weeks, but I thought, why not challenge myself? Because I'm still getting used to all the video editing things, to make a horror sign-off and do a Silent Hill F themed thing. So a massive shout out to everybody who is on the Helping Hero tier over on Patreon. That is the higher level donation tier, which is instrumental to allowing me to do this. So as always, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much for letting me do this. So shout out to Alex Semenchuk, Evil Wabbit Habit, Hunter Ferguson, King Muttley, Lukey Plays Games, Nathan Ellis, Nova John, Null, Ray Montano, Robert Mainprize, Sean O'Byrne, Soul, and VK's Game Time. A humongous, endless thank you to all of you. And I wonder whether I should do some sort of request like outro thing, and then you guys could all decide collectively what kind of outro I should attempt, whilst I'm still getting used to things, because I barely, I know enough to put the show together, but when it comes to special effects and things like that, I am brand new. Me looking up the way to do cherry petals last week on the video, that was fun. But you got to figure this stuff out. Even changing the lighting behind me took forever. I had to do a whole thing with my modem so that the phone would talk to the lights again, which, only in 2025 could you have that sentence of the phone didn't want to talk to the lights, and I had to do the thing. But anyway, massive thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for sticking around, for taking part in the Discord and everything else. Again, can't do this without you, so thank you. And yes, keep enjoying the Discord, keep enjoying the Patreon, and keep enjoying the Just Good Game News. I will catch you very soon. Goodbye.